Hello, everybody, and welcome to the How podcast with Cindy Deng. Welcome, Cindy.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be part of this, and I've seen so many of the past episodes, and I've been loving all of them.
Oh, I'm so excited about that. Well, thank you so much for joining. Well, Cindy, let's start with the beginning. Tell us about your childhood. Where did you grow up? How did that influence the person you became?
Yeah, so I grew up I was born in China, in a province in an area called Guangzhou in China. And I grew up there since till first grade. I completed first grade, and that's when my family immigrated to the U.S. So from 8 years old onwards, I was growing up in the U.S. in L.A., in the Chinatown area of L.A. So it was very much an immigrant lifestyle. And I remember coming to the U.S. I didn't even understand much English. I was remember arriving at the airport at LAX and not knowing, what all the buttons on the elevator meant. And when I was in elementary school, I remember someone in my class sitting next to me was telling me to scoot over, and I'm like, school's not over. But I think my parents were educators. They were in academics. My dad was in chemistry, but he was like a professor or teaching chemistry back in China. My mom was also in academics. So obviously growing up, my parents were very much focused around academics. So doing well in school, hard work, those were part of my upbringing. And but there was also a part of me. I was the younger of two children. My brother was about 6 or 7 years older than me, and I don't know if it is part of that younger child syndrome where you want to be different. You are a little bit more rebellious. So I know growing up, I was also a little bit challenging, a little bit more like the black sheep in the family. I want to study German, like for whatever reason, not. My parents pushed me to go to Chinese school, and for a while I did. And then when I got to high school, I'm like, no, I want to learn German. And so in college, then I study abroad in Germany. And without my parents knowing, and my parents didn't even know, I got my passport. And until I was about to get on a flight, I'm like, Mom, Dad, I'm going to Germany. And I didn't even tell them that I was living with a host family because, with traditional Chinese parents, like if they knew I was living with a family, they would have all these questions about who's that family, what's their background, who are you living with. So they didn't know. But I said I'm going to be living in a dorm. And which was true because for the first couple of weeks it was in the dorm, and then you moved to living with a host family. So yeah, there was that little bit of always that little rebellious and wanting to be a little bit different from my brother. He was engineering major, and I went to a liberal arts college. So so that was my upbringing, and that's kind of how I still kind of live my life right now, where kind of challenging and doing things a little bit different than what people might normally expect.
And so then what did you do? You went to this liberal arts college and you did your studies in Germany.
Yeah, yeah. I study abroad. I majored in economics. I also met my husband, my now husband, in that liberal arts college. It was a very small liberal arts college. I think the total student body was only about 2,000. And one of the graduating statistic is over 50% of the student body end up getting married to each other. So we end up being part of that statistics. Which was great because I think we got married relatively young, and so one of the benefit I see is when you get married relatively young is you're not set in your ways. So there
Mm.
were things that I've adopted from him that I thought was, good. There were things that he adopted from me, and then I think we learn and grew with each other. So I think that was really valuable. And another thing is, by the time we went to Wharton, it became a joint experience. And I didn't have one of the pressure of like finding a mate in MBA, because my partner and my husband was really having that Wharton experience together with me.
Wow, that's so cool. It gives me chills.
And I think he would say that that 2 years, that MBA experience, that was really part of his experience too.
It's really awesome when your partner supports you in that way.
Yeah, and the thing is, he went to law school, so I went to law school with him before I applied to MBA, and then I knew I wanted to apply to MBA at some point, and so it was good that he also then accompanied and supported me when I went took my part in going to graduate school.
And Cindy, why did you choose Wharton?
So I knew I wanted to go to business school. And I remember I was out in LA at the time, and I was going to one of those informational sessions at UCLA for the Anderson School. And I remember talking to Linda Baldwin, who was the director of admission at the Anderson School at the time, and I was mentioning to her, I feel I'm still challenged at work, and I am learning a lot at work. I'm not sure when would be the good time for me to apply. And then she straight out said to me, "Well, you're not going to be competitive." And that was a surprise and a shock to me. I'm like, what do you mean I'm not competitive? Because in my, for me, I feel I'm a very competitive person. But and she said, well, you're thinking 2 steps ahead instead of 4 steps ahead. And that got me thinking. And I went back and I'm like, wait, okay, I need to think, if this is a goal, if I, for me as my personality, I'm always going to be seeking something that will challenge me. So while I am still challenged at work, I am not really thinking ahead enough of what would it take for me to actually be 4 steps ahead or 5 steps ahead. And so that moment got me to, okay, I am going to apply. And of course, I think like most people who apply to business school, then you start researching on which school, you start visiting a lot of the schools. And I visited schools from the West Coast to the East Coast. And I think similar to what many people have said, it was just that feel of when you got to the Wharton campus. And I remember it was still, at that time, we didn't have Huntsman Hall. So, and I didn't even know that our incoming class will go into Huntsman Hall. What I saw was Vince Hall, which was, kind of wasn't, like the most ideal. It was very concrete and a little bit cold. But even that, I just felt like this is the place. I felt so comfortable there. I visited in classrooms, and I was able to strike up conversations so easily with some of the first year or second year students in that class, and I just felt that I belong. And when I found out that Wharton also had the Lauder program, which was a joint 2-year MA in international studies, I'm like, that was the ideal. That was the program for me. And I could not find anywhere else that could give me that with the joint degree and the feel that I like. This is the place where I really belong, and I feel that I am a fit here. And so I decided that Wharton is the only place that I will apply to. And so of course I wanted to, consider the other school as well. But in my mind, all right, this year, I'm just going to apply to Wharton. If I don't get in, next year, I'll apply to the other schools. And I think it was that, I think that commitment and that, that focus really helped me in my application and to show through that this is the place that I belong in. And I remember when, I could even, before getting the acceptance letter, in my mind, I could visualize being at Wharton. And so when, like in the couple of the days before when we were, all anticipating for that, acceptance letter, whether you get in or not, part of me was anxious, but then part of me was also feeling I got to get in. Like there's no way I couldn't get in because it was so strong in my mind and I could visualize it and I could feel it being, taking place that, when the acceptance letter came, I was like ecstatic,
Wow, what a story. And then with Lauder, you went earlier, right?
Yep. Yeah, we started, I think we started maybe in April or somewhere around then. So we started earlier, a couple of months earlier than the regular MBA class. And so I think that was also another great experience is by the time the full MBA course started, you already have this community that you know and you built. We have a phrase, it's louder love, right? And so it's like louder love. And it is it's a really tight and strong community, even not just in your current class, but the class that is preceding or coming after.
And so, how was the rest of business school for you?
Oh, it's Wharton is amazing. I think it is my first year was all over the place because I was so excited. You're seeing it's like a kid going into a candy store, and there is so many things that could entice you. I went in thinking, I still was thinking, when I applied to Wharton, I wanted focusing around technology, but you can't help but get sucked into some of the, like finance and, all the, other majors. And at one point, I was like, okay, maybe I'll try out finance. And then I took accounting. And accounting at Wharton is nothing like accounting you take other places. And I felt like, okay, finance, maybe I may not be smart enough for as a finance major at Wharton because, and so but I tested it out. I tried it out. During my first year, I was trying out like all these different careers. I was interviewing for management consulting, technology, investment management, and there's just so much experience packed in. First year was stressful, but I think it also gave me perspectives and gives me experience and really allowed me to test out, okay, what do I really want to do? Um, and it allows me to have that experience without really much risk. I don't see any other ways where I could have gotten all those experiences and tested out and validated for myself which direction I really wanted to go, right? And then the Wharton also exposed me to so much, different parts of the world in such a special way. Like, I was able to do the Middle East track, got to see Kuwait, got to see Lebanon, Dubai. It's just and having those company meetings, being able to set up with leaders of corporations in these companies. Got to do a whole month in India where I was writing, as part of my Lauder dissertation, and saw so much, spent a month there with other fellow Lauder students. Went to experience like classmates' wedding in Argentina. I've never seen Argentines know how to do a wedding. So was able to participate in Pablo's wedding in Argentina, where it starts at 10 or 10:30 at night and it goes all the way to the morning. And I'm like, wow, like that was amazing experience. Saw wedding, class Jessel's wedding in India, my classmate Min's wedding in Africa. So like from both just a career exploration and world exploration standpoint, it was, at Wharton I can't think of, any other place that could have given me that experience.
Yeah, I second that. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And sounds like you had a blast.
Oh, I had such a blast. And at that, when you're in school, it seems like money didn't matter. I'm like, yes, I'll go there. I'll go there. I'll do this. I'll do that too. But I think that's the way you should use that. Maximize and make most use of that experience. It's something that I'll say you never experience again, like to that degree and to that intensity.
And so you ask yourself this question, what do I really want? And to me, that's pretty remarkable and mature, because there is a lot of pressure to go into either finance on Wall Street or management consulting. Those were the two mainstream careers. Yet you did not give into peer pressure and considered and evaluated your future options for yourself. So what was your line of thinking and how did you solve that? How did you answer that question for yourself? What do I really want?
Right, and I think that's one of the more valuable takeaways from Wharton is that it did allow me the chance to explore in all those other areas where I might have that curiosity. And I did go through the process and study and try to prepare for all these different interviews. For some reason, I don't know how I did it, but I even ended up being in some final rounds of investment management interview. And when I went through some of those interview processes, and some of the jobs and some of the companies, is like, okay, it's prestigious, but it's not me, right? And having the ability and the opportunity to go through that helps you to refine your thinking and actually makes you more confident and makes decisions without having as much regret of whether you should have considered it, because I did. Right? And I just felt that it wasn't me. And I remember like Yahoo was one of the companies that I wanted to target. And luckily, a Lauder alumni from the 1980s, Alan Kwan, who's a very much, a supporter of the Wharton and Lauder community, gave me that internship that allows me a step in. But that internship didn't guarantee me the position after graduation. And after graduation, you still have to seek it out. One thing I learned at Wharton is like, don't push and don't rush things. Things will come. When obviously you put effort behind it, and but you don't need to rush and push things. I felt I was very calm after graduation, where I didn't have a position lined up. So I was one of those statistics, like at graduation time, I didn't have a job, but I also felt I didn't feel pressure at all during that time. And in fact, we went on a trip, and we went on a trip to the Wharton Global Alumni Forum in Russia, and had a blast there. But I had no job at the time. I'm like, I don't know where we would be going, but I did believe that things will things will come into place. You don't need to rush it. I believe in the education and all that Wharton had brought, and ultimately the right opportunity will come.
Wow, Cindy, I have to say, I remember the pressure was really, really high to have a job by the time of graduation. And I remember all my classmates who didn't have it were very stressed out.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really amazing that you kept your cool and had that confidence.
Well, I think I learned to have that cool. I remember doing Dip Week in my first year, and everyone, I mean, it's your first year, you got all these interview, everyone is trying to do the best, and I was freaking out at that time. And I remember my husband was telling me, and I think this is one of the benefits of having a spouse while you're going to MBA school. And he's like, just calm down. And I remember I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna drop all my whatever, all the stuff that I was trying to prepare and drill in my head. And that evening, I remember my cohort mate, Ben Rellis, and was doing a comedy night show. And so I'm just going to go to that. And like, forget about studying. I'm just going to go to this comedy night show. And it was so uplifting. I mean, I had, I got so relaxed. I didn't, like the pressure was lifted. And from that experience on, I just felt that you don't need to put so much pressure on yourself. Things ultimately will fall in place. And so I've taken that attitude, and I think that experience, and I have to thank Ben for that, for having that comedy night show at the right moment, at the right time, and that I did go, and just brought such a relief to me, and took so much pressure off of me. And I took that kind of perspective that you don't have to, you don't have to, just because someone else is already have a job, or they are much more well prepared, it'll be okay. You could take a different, maybe a slightly delayed path, but it doesn't mean that you're not gonna, get to the top results as everyone else.
How did life unfold for you since Wharton?
So I did work at Yahoo for over 8 years after graduation. It started, but it didn't feel like 8 years in the same job, because I've moved and had so many different roles within Yahoo. Started out in the U.S., and then there was an opportunity for me to play somewhat of a lead role of a product launch in Asia. And I took up that opportunity. So I talked to my husband, and we packed up bags. Initially we thought it would be 2 years stint. And then now, 10 plus years later, we're still in Asia. So I've had multiple different roles, from sales, product marketing, also sales again, with different offices, managing across the Asia Pacific region. And I think that experience brought me to my next opportunity after Yahoo, which was working for more of a startup, a startup company in advertising technology. They were starting to build their operation in Asia, and they wanted hire someone to lead that. And so that was you know, that was the natural next stage for me. After Yahoo, it was very enticing to actually build a team from scratch, from the start, and then seeing that scale and come to life, and ultimately the company we took the company to exit through acquisition with Singtel. And after that Singtel acquisition, then I decided to step away and actually take a break for about 5 months, and contemplate, with no pressure on what my next role would be. So for during that 5 months, my husband and I, we traveled to Latin America, we did Galapagos, we did Peru. So that was another like just amazing experience. And during that period, then I was contacted by a recruiter who was telling me, would you be interested in this company which is already very strong in Asia Pacific, very strong, highly reputable around mobile, is backed by some of the biggest VCs like Sequoia. And as he was describing that, I'm like, this sounds very familiar. I'm like, could it be App Annie? Is this company App Annie? And because obviously, I know App Annie because it was founded by my cohort mate at Wharton, and it was also backed by another cohort mate. We were all in cohort C, and he was one of the early investors at App Annie. So there was a lot of things about the company. It was a fit for what I was looking for at that stage. And so, I jumped on that opportunity, and I've been with the company since.
Since you joined App Annie, how have you evolved since?
So I think since joining App Annie, there's a lot of parts that, because it's all about leading teams and how do you drive and get the most out of teams, whether it is in periods of when things are going well or when things, aren't, going as planned. And I think when it comes to leadership is easy when everything is going well. I think you are tested the most, and that's when you learn the most is when things aren't going as well, and how do you inspire and how do you bring the team together and work towards that common goal. So I think there's a lot of lessons around leadership and what are those qualities that you need to have, right? And before coming into to App Annie, I was also, my prior company was the advertising technology company, and it also went through a very tough period. We had to do some turnaround, and a new CEO was brought in, and he introduced the book to us. It was called The Advantage. And so I think that book on The Advantage, it talks about organizational health and what makes companies successful. And it's not about how smart an organization is, but how healthy the organization is, and what are the different components of to make an organization healthy. And so I think like that concept that I learned from the advertising technology company also helped me at App Annie. And in fact, that same book and that same philosophy is now being used by the management team at App Annie as well. So I think it just hones in a lot more experiences and to me about what it takes to lead. And to me, a lot of that is around, listening, being empathetic, being accountable, because ultimately the buck stops with me when, how is the Asia Pacific region doing? If there's anything that is not performing well, ultimately it's the buck stops with me, and I have to be accountable for areas that, needs for what has done well, but then also things that haven't gone so well. And building that trust with the team, that even though in periods when things are not going well, that they can trust me, right? And that they are on board with me. And to build that trust, I think you need to have that authenticity, where people knows that what they hear from you, it is you. You're not just uh, just saying things that to like propaganda, but it is the authentic me on what I think, But ultimately, it's also about being able to make decisions and being decisive, right? And being decisive, because the team, you may listen, you want to listen to all the different opinions. Ultimately, the team look for the leader to make a decision, and is being able to make, be decisive, at the right time. I believe in the phrase of, getting out of your comfort zone. And, out of your comfort zone is where the magic happens. And stepping into opportunities where the company needs the most help. Because when you can contribute, things will, the benefits and the awards will follow. And at Annie, at one point, I was given the opportunity to also lead the EMEA region. And, before, a couple of years ago, back at Yahoo, I would have thought about, oh, is this, am I ready for it? Do I have the bandwidth? It's like different hours of the day with APAC and EMEA. But this time around, when I was given that opportunity, I didn't really hesitate to jump on it. And like, yes, I'll do it. I'll figure out how to, manage around it. But I'll do it. And especially when it was aligned with, what I like to do, and which is around building and growing teams. Now in my career, I always, also think back on how do I apply that, and how do I give back within my team. Oh, and one of the very early impression I had in my career was someone who gave me an opportunity and believed in me when I was it was actually an intern when I was in college. And I was helping him to do a request for proposal. It was to Bank of America, and he invited me to go and present to Bank of America. And this is when I was still in college. And he mentioned and during the flight, he said, why don't you do the introduction? And I was like, me? I'm like, I haven't even graduated from college at that time. But he gave me opportunity to, like, to me, he believed in me more than I believed in myself at that point. And he gave me an opportunity that I didn't believe I was ready for. And that's been a philosophy that I use with my team, is how do I give them that opportunity and make them believe in themselves more than they might have, believe in them at the moment. And I think that is a very powerful feeling when you're on the receiving end. So that's something that I'm always conscious of, is how do I give that, feeling of you're ready for this, and enable someone to feel that confidence. But in terms of, giving back, I work with a lot of startup these days, and I'm also involved in a lot of angel funds and investing. So giving back and providing some of those advice, whether it is pro bono or if they come and ask for connections and introductions, those are something that I very much want to provide and give back to.
Pretty awesome. And it sounds like you are this backbone for your team. You mentioned listening, compassion, building trust, inspiring them to believe in themselves, and then leading them through the hard times or not so good times, as you said. How do you nourish yourself so that you can be there for them?
Yeah. I think it's still, first of all, those are things that I'm conscious and I want to do good in. But I also feel, I'm continuously improving and seeking improvement on those areas. But on how do you nourish yourself, I think this is something that has been spoken about in with many of your past, people who participated in this. Is ultimately, when you're younger in your career, you push hard, 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 and ultimately sometimes it takes a toll on you. And I think it did happen to me in a part of my career where I was pushing myself so hard, working long hours, weekends, and it was nonstop. And I had health issues. I had it was like eczema outbreak on my whole body, and it was happening for a while. And I go to dermatologists and doctors, and they couldn't figure out, and they couldn't give me medication that really relieved that. Ultimately, I think it had come down to stress, and I was looking for alternative ways to figure that out. How do I fix this problem? I got myself to learn meditation. I invested and I learned transcendental meditation. I don't do it on a daily practice at all, but it is a tool set that I can refer to when I find myself not focusing, or just my mind is going all over the place and I can't focus. I will stop and take 20 minutes to meditate. And then once that meditation helped me to get healthier again, then I started exercising, and now I have a very regimented schedule. Like things, I put it into my calendar, and people know about it. If there's meetings that conflict with that time, I'm like, I can only attend up to this point, and I need to drop off. And and so, like, exercise is a key part of my regular routine. And I enjoy that exercise and that time. And it doesn't, before I would think, oh, I don't have time for this. But it's just you didn't make time for it. And when you make time for it, it just helps you. So, like, you don't really lose the time that you could have done something else. It just you're in much better shape, with your mind to be able to complete that job, even though you took an hour, off of it for exercise.
What are the dreams that you still want to fulfill?
Well, so part of, I mentioned my husband and I have a dream of traveling to 100 countries together. So we're at 67, so there's still a lot more countries that we need to go. We have, so those are definitely on our bucket list. We tend to be, we tend to seek out thrills in our travel as well. So we have to take a look at what are some of the kind of the thrill-seeking places that we need to do. I think Antarctica is definitely one of those. A couple of years ago, we did Running of the Bulls, and and then I think we still probably need like bungee jumping in New Zealand or something like that. So it's not just on the travel, but also the life, the experience of whether it's land or sea. We started diving, and so now there's a whole new world to explore. He's been diving for a long time, so that's a whole new world to explore. So that's more on the personal and travel front. As I mentioned, some of the other things from a beyond just the personal travel. I do want to be more involved, as when I'm not working full time at some point, is being more involved with startups, with VCs, and maybe even helping with accelerators. So those would be something that I have a lot of passion for. especially in my job where we're working with technology and all of different companies and that are startups or growing beyond to startups. So being with startups, being a part of boards of these companies and seeing advising and helping these companies to grow. So those would be something that I would look forward to in perhaps next phase of my career.
This brings me back to something that you mentioned before, authenticity as a key ingredient for good leadership. To be authentic, we must know ourselves first and foremost so that we can share that and communicate in that way. How have you been getting to know yourself to have that authenticity?
Oh, deep question. um, um, I think part of that, like I said, is at Wharton. It starts with at Wharton where you experiment and you try things and figure out what resonate with you and what you do enjoy and what you're passionate about. Like for instance, I realized I'm not an entrepreneur because I've had ideas and I've had thoughts about, oh, wouldn't it be good to do this? But I never had that urge or the inclination to actually kick it off and do something and to build it. And so, that gives me the realization like, okay, that's not necessarily my strong suit. But over the years, I also know that I love working with teams and I love working with people and I love building teams and building individuals on teams for them to grow and get to the next levels in their career. And that's something that I get a lot of energy from, right? So I think is, what are things that actually gives you energy rather than drain your energy? And even though, at times in moments where the situation might drain your energy, but you still find energy in overcoming that, right? And so I think those are moments where you see like, okay, this is what what's meant for me and what I'm good at or what I really enjoy doing, and I will enjoy doing this even in situations where it is tough.
Hmm. And what would you like to share with our audience and our community?
I think it's maybe it is taking risk, um, and not be afraid of taking risks, stepping out of the comfort zone. There was a book I recently read. I think it was called The Attributes by. It was a Navy SEAL called a Navy SEAL named Rich Divini. And one of the things he mentioned was constantly seeking the edges, and step onto it and find your new horizon. And to me, that resonates with me because it's kind of very similar to something I have lived by, which is the stepping out of your comfort zone. And the comfort zone is where, the magic happens. And always, like there and try to do something that's different, right? So I try to live by it personally and in my career. And when I have tried to do that, it always brings such a there's a when I do it personally, there's that adrenaline lift. Like I did it. I overcome that part that was fearful to me, and I did it, and it empowers me so much. And when you do it in your career, and then you see that it's actually was what took you to the next stage or next step in your career, that is, incredibly fulfilling.
We usually round up our conversation with this question. Uh, to me, Wharton is the place blank.
So to me, Wharton is a safe place to for you to freely explore and experiment without risk and expanding your possibilities. It is a safe place to explore yourself and the world. Um, I mean, in the 2 years, Wharton has really opened my eyes in so many ways that I can never imagine. And to have all those experiences and things that you're able to explore and experiment in such a compact period of time, I think that's what makes Wharton special. And one thing I realized is it's not just, you know, in order to get that full experience and experimentation and exploration, you do need to be amongst a group that have the diverse perspective and experiences to share with you. Because if everyone was just coming from the same or similar angles, similar perspective and background, you're not going to explore and experiment and get perspectives in the same way. And I think that's what makes Wharton so special is that diversity of people, background, experiences, opinions, um, that you get to be immersed in that. And it is like I haven't had any other experience like that at all. And you might be in a work environment where you have people coming from different background, but it's not the same, right? It's still, you're still kind of in a similar industry. And I mean, I can't think of any other experience where Wharton is able to, that you're able to get, such a immersive and compact education, and just, not just academic education, but just, life education. So that's really, really special. And I've always said Wharton is the best 2 years of my life. And my husband will say the same.
Wow, that was beautiful.
Oh,
Thank you so much. Thank you so
thank
much,
you,
Cindy.
Elena.
It was really wonderful talking to you and hearing your story. Um, such a such a compelling story of growth, um, boldness, and uh, leadership. Wow! Thank you so much.
Thank you, Elena, for putting these together. I feel like, especially during COVID where we can't see each other, I feel so connected to my classmates by just listening and catch up on what they're doing and learning from them. So thank you so much.
Thank you, and thanks everybody for watching. Um, we really appreciate your attention and your participation. Thank you.